Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will be starting in a few minutes. Welcome to the webinar, and if you're on the phone, welcome to the call. Just want to let everyone know we'll be starting in about 5 minutes. Thank you for those who have joined us on this very beautiful evening after a rainy day. Hopefully, the rain stopped where you are. Feel free to let us know where you're coming from tonight, where you're viewing this broadcast, and we should be starting in another 4 minutes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again for our monthly series, Inspiring Ideas from Experts in the Field. The webinar series is in our third year for No for Mass, and it is our hope and goal that we can make quality farm management and garden education easily accessible to everyone, everywhere, at any time. My name is Anna Gilbert Muhammad, and I'm the Food Access and Webinar Coordinator for No for Mass. My email is anna at nofamass.org, You can feel free to contact me with feedback about this webinar or with any questions concerning our food access or webinar programming. Also, if there are suggestions for webinars you'd like to see in the future, feel free to let me know about that as well. Before we start tonight, I would like to take this time to thank our sponsors, Simply Organic and Dr. Bronner's, for supporting the production of this series. Also, a very big and many thanks to all the NOFA Mass staff and board who have assisted to make this workshop series possible, and for the use of our new webinar portal that we are using for the second time tonight. If you are not a member of NOFA Mass, please consider joining to support our education and policy work. You can visit our website to learn more. And as a side note, this is indeed the closeout of our membership month. So please, if you have not had a chance to either renew your membership or get a new membership, go to our website and let's take care of that right away. You get wonderful access to many of our programs for soil technical assistance, discounts on the conferences and education events, and just your membership really helps us to further our policy work, our advocacy work, and a lot of the work that's done in food access, soil technical assistance, and our other programming. Our presenter tonight is Jessy Gill. She is the Assistant Director of World Farmers. We're so happy to have her tonight. Tonight's format will be a presentation with questions that will be posed intermittently during the presentation, so you get a chance to send in your questions as the presentation goes. The best way to do that is to use the question feature in your dashboard. You can click on that and type in your question. I'll see it and get that to Jessy. If you are joining us by phone, feel free to text me at 413-214-1237. Again, that's 413-214-1237, and we'll get your questions to Jessy. So at this time, I will not hold us any further. I'm very excited to hear about what Jessy will talk about in terms of the wonderful work that Flats Mentor Farm is doing, a part of the World Farmers Program out in Lancaster. And I will turn the presentation over at this point to Jessy. And Jessy, you're on the line, correct?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm here.
All right. So Jessy, the call and the webinar is yours.
Great. And my screen is all good? Everyone can see it? I hope so. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Okay, good. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for being here. As Anna mentioned, I would like to pause for questions throughout. So if you have any questions as I'm talking, please just send them to Anna, and she'll be sure to pause me if I forget to pause to incorporate them into the presentation. Even though it'll be presentation style, this is my first time doing it webinar without faces. So I generally like to take questions as I go because it really helps inform for everyone in the audience the presentation. And on that note, if there are things that you came to the webinar hoping to hear about that I'm not covering, feel free to interject. If I'm covering it later, you know, and if not, I'll pause and answer to the best of my ability. So I work for a nonprofit named World Farmers. We're based in Lancaster, Massachusetts. And World Farmers has been around since 2010, but we support our Keystone program is the Flats Mentor Farm program, which you may or may not have heard of. And that program has been around since 1984. So it's been around for quite a while. And it started, you know, without being termed a program at all. So it started with a refugee farmer who did not have land, approaching an immigrant farmer who did have land, asking to use some of her land. And the refugee farmer was a refugee, a Hmong farmer from the Vietnam War, approached this farmer asking to just use a portion of it. And that was in 1983. And the immigrant farmer, knowing what it was like to be landless in this country, said yes. And the following year, that same Hmong farmer came back and said, you know, can we use your land? And she had family members, and each year it grew. So that's really how it started to solidify. In 1984, it moved to in Lancaster, Massachusetts. and it's been there ever since. So that land is a 70-acre parcel where we butt the Bolton Flats Wildlife Management Region, which is why the name of the farm is the Flats Mentor Farm. And we're right along 117, but we're also right along the Nashua River, which you can see from this second image here, which means that the farm floods. And we are on a NOAA designated floodplain. So we farm every spring. We're currently flooded, and we're often termed Lake Lancaster. And we'll flood again in late season. So we're usually last on the farm in the region and sometimes first off the land in the region. So the farmers that farm at the flats are very resilient and acknowledge the additional barriers that this land provides, and yet they still participate, and they travel for relatively long lengths to be able to utilize this land and become a part of this program. Something else I wanted to draw attention to on this map is the plot sizes. So you'll see that we have a lot of different plot sizes at the flats. It's a little easier to see on this aerial picture, but we have the larger tracts of land, and then we also have the smaller tracts of land. And that really, shows that we are a program that gives what we can when we can. And so a lot of those larger tracts of land are leased by the Hmong farmers who've been with us for a long time. We have the granddaughter of the very first farmer in 1983, in 1984, still farming on the land, and her grandchild comes and helps her farm and helps her go to market. So there's 4 generations just encapsulated in that story. And so a lot of the Hmong farmers have the larger tracts of land that you see, as well as the first African farmers that joined us back in 2005. And that was because we had far fewer farmers at that time. So in 2005, we had about between 50 to 60, maybe 70 farmers. And once we got the first group of African farmers, which were Burundian and Kenyan, within 5 years of that, we really started to see an influx of African farmers join our program. And now the program supports overwhelmingly East African farmers. So, the program fluctuated a lot in terms of demographics of farmers who participate in the program. For a long time, it was only Hmong farmers, and then 2005 was the first time that we really incorporated other cultures. But even through all those efforts, we'd never done any outreach for farmers to participate in the program. The program has always been word of mouth. And that's something I really like to underscore because it shows the really true need of the program. And I think it parallels the story of how the program started and how it really didn't start as a program. It started as a service. It started as a person helping another or supporting another in their goals to farm and become a active member of this new life and in this new society that they're in. So, we've never had to do any outreach. And if we did outreach, we would need to have about 5 more farms of 70 acres to be able to hold everybody. Because even without outreach, we have over 300 people. It's really more than that, but 300 farmers on the land and many more people on and off the farm supporting each of those farmers' plots. So the majority of the farmers are East Africans, specifically Kenyan. We have folks from all across the continent, and then we still have a good group of Hmong farmers, those who were originally with us, and also those who heard about the program much later and have since stayed to become farmers. Many of the original Hmong farmers moved to other states because land prices are much cheaper in areas outside of Massachusetts, and so there's folks that moved to Minnesota, California, South Carolina, Georgia, and they're currently continuing to farm as well out there. And then we also have folks from the Caribbean and from South America. excuse me. One of the most frequent questions I get when I give this presentation is, where do the farmers live? So that's when I created this kind of current place of residence chart here. And we don't have any farmers that live on the land. So I really like to make it clear that we work with farmers, immigrant farmers, not farm workers. And so we work with folks who've come to this country, whether it was through the refugee resettlement program or through family decisions to relocate to the United States, and are looking for, if they came through the refugee resettlement program, they're often housed in apartments with no access to land, and the story's not much different for those who immigrated here. And, everyone that we serve in this program comes from an agrarian background. So we're not in the business of making farmers. We're in the business of supporting those who already have the drive and interest, and really the drive and passion to farm. And so we're a different type of beginning farmer program. We don't have mandatory classes. There's no graduation. After 2 years, there's no certification of now you're a farmer. Each individual decides how long they want to stay with the program and in what direction they want to take their farming efforts. And to be able to support them in all those different ways, internally in the office, we've created this kind of phase program, and I'll get into that. But the last thing I'll say on the current place of residence is you'll see that we have folks that travel from a great distance to be able to access this land. And that's because there aren't other programs that function in this very open way. We have, over 300 farmers. There's no way we could put forward, required trainings with a staff of, 4 or 5 people. So each individual chooses the path that they want to take with this access to land, access to infrastructure, access to TA. But really, the program is based on farmer-to-farmer learning, and that's why we call it Flats Mentor Farm, with that mentorship piece. So you have folks who drive up from Rhode Island, down from New Hampshire, and then the actually majority of our farmers live in Worcester, but a close second is Providence, Rhode Island. And then I also like to highlight that the majority of the farmers are female, which is exciting to underscore. So we have 3 phases, and we're working on a 4th phase. Phase 4 is in development, but the phases are pretty simple, and a farmer can move pretty seamlessly through these phases. If they move into phase 2 and 3, they can always move back to 1. It's really up to them. But phase 1 is for first-year farmers, so those who have just joined the program, and also for all farmers who are more subsistence farmers. The majority of the farmers that we work with are phase 1 farmers. So the majority of the farmers in the program are there to grow for their families, they might sell a little on the side. Almost every farmer on the land sells a little bit to the community, or at least distributes to their community. We have many farmers who say that they like to do free handouts at the church, because they're very proud of what they've produced and they want to feed others who are looking for these crops. And then we've got others who, once they've filled their freezers, as you can see from Rael smiling in at her standing freezer, I would say every farmer I've asked the question, have you purchased a standing freezer? They've said yes. So this food really does feed even those who've pursued it as a business. It feeds them and their families throughout the whole season, throughout the whole winter. This picture with Rael was taken by our executive director, Maria Morera, in, I believe it was the month of May, a couple years back. And you can see that even in May, before she was on the land again, she still got a whole reserve of crops, and very proud of it. And then the left picture you'll see is Jane, and that is her son on her back, and that was his first summer, and she said that he would be coming every summer, and it would be a part of his learning experience and a part of him knowing, the culture that he comes from and that she came from, and a part of that family connection. And so it was a beautiful conversation. I wanted to capture it with a picture, and you'll see a lot of kids running around at the farm. So that's phase 1. our intake process is pretty straightforward. We ask for very minimal information. All other information that farmers want to give along their learning process or along their career and business development is all voluntary. So if they want to utilize us and our support to help establish a DBA or an LLC, or help make a bank account for their business, then, or want to access an FSA loan, that's information that if they choose to use our services, then we support them in whatever way we can. But we really only ask for their name and their country of origin and 3 modes of contact. And the 3 modes is really just because there's some folks who only have one. And so if they only have one, we're sure that we have it. And if they only have 2, if we can't get a hold of them one way, we can try the other. But they're not required to have all 3 modes. Many of the farmers don't have emails. And then we started doing orientation meetings. That's been really helpful to kind of get everyone on the same page. But other than that, the intake process is pretty fluid and barrier-free. And then we have phase 2 and phase 3 farmers, which are phase 3 farmers are the commercial farmers, and then phase 2 farmers is just the phase between 1 and 3. And it's the space that farmers are in before they are fully established, either before they've established their own business, or before they've really started to become consistent sellers at the market, either wholesale or retail. And phase 2 are those that phase 2 and 3 are the ones that we offer most services to. Most of the phase 1 farmers will see them once for their assessments, and then we might see them on and off the farm, but a lot of them will come nights after work or weekends when we're not at the farm. And so the phase 2 and phase 3 are those that we cater most of the services towards. However, all farmers are open to be a part of any of the services, which includes assistance with pest management, irrigation, soil health. We have bees at the farm, so pollination, and then the additional services are more business development, market access, and along those veins. Any questions so far? Feel free to send them to Anna.
If we can, I do have a few questions if we can interject
Sure.
at this point. So you mentioned that some of the population and demographics of the farmers. Are there any farmers that might be 2nd or 3rd generation that are working at Flats Mentor?
Actually, yes. So we have one farmer who has put his name on different FSA loans and actually helped his family establish the business. That is a 2nd generation. And there are many other 2nd generations that are supporting their parents, but maybe don't take ownership of being a lead farmer. But that story of that farmer who is a lead farmer as a 2nd generation is kind of a success story of not graduating folks off the land. So he, helped his farmers. He's the reason his farmers could go to market. He helped them at age 11, and he was the one interfacing with customers. And he's now 27, and at age 25, after going through all higher education, going to a job in Boston, he came back around and said, what I want to do is farm. And so he came back full-time 2 years ago and is now a lead farmer. Many of the other 2nd generation folks at the farm are there as a support system for their family, or much incorporated in the way Jane was bringing her 1-year-old of, being a part of the culture that's developed at the farm.
Another viewer sent in a question concerning some of the markets. You mentioned that many do grow for markets. Is that a market that Flats Mentor provides? And if so, do they also participate in local markets that might be in different areas that surround the farm?
Sure. I'll get to that, definitely. Any others?
And our last question is, you mentioned that a great deal of the farmers are women. Do you have a percentage exactly of how many are women versus men?
So the last time we did the numbers, it was 64% are female. And I would say that it's actually higher than that. That's just the names that's based on the what we call the lead farmer. That's listed on the spreadsheet, and I can name at least 10 farmers where the female may be the lead, but the male is listed. And we don't change the name of the lead farmer. We take whatever the farmer has chosen to give to us, and then actually this year one of them switched over to the wife's name. So it's just depending on what the family chooses to do. But yeah, as of last year, it was 64% of our farmers are female.
Okay. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for
And for
those.
those, oh,
Yeah.
no worries. Thank you. And for those in our viewing audience and on the phone, don't forget you can use the question feature to send in your questions, or you can text me directly at 413-214-1237.
Thanks, Anna. So speaking to the markets question, farmers markets, we have folks going to around 25 farmers markets around Massachusetts. It's mostly Eastern Massachusetts. The number used to be higher. The number of farmers markets attended used to be higher. And it has started to shift over the last few years for a few different reasons. One was we had one farmer who went to 5 different markets that moved to Georgia, is now farming out there. But there are other reasons, like some farmers decide to start to scale back and restructure, because as World Farmers, we also support in wholesale sales, which I will get to next. And so there's some farmers that as they're aging or as their kids are going to college and their customer interface is no longer able to be a part of their business, then they are restructuring and rethinking, how they can access those markets. And that's a big reason why we started to scale up our wholesale efforts. So all farmers markets efforts are spearheaded by the farmer themselves. We don't staff the markets, and we don't control the crop plans. We do support in terms of resources like tents, tables, signage, price cards. We support in understanding of SNAP and WIC and enrolling to be sure that each farmer can accept those things. And we support in vendor applications and identifying which markets a farmer might want to go to. We also support with assistance at the market if if they've never gone to a farmer's market. We'll go with them for the first couple times or upon request. But we don't. There are a lot of different models out there, and I'll get into that in a moment. But our model is very much catered towards farmer individuality and independence. And each farmer, so although they're marketing under the same Flats Mentor Farm banner, each farmer is running their own individual business under that banner. So they've decided the crops to bring, the prices to set, and so on. So Zong Yang is the farmer I had mentioned, the young farmer, second generation, and that's in the bottom corner here. That's him with his mom. And so I like to show this. They go to about three to 4 markets. I believe they scaled back this year, so I think it's at 3 now. And you'll see 2 different. I like to show these pictures because it shows 2 different setups. Each farmer also decides, what setup makes sense for them at which market, and anything that needs to change depending on each market. And what I mean by that is you'll see in this bottom corner under the tent that it's very much a traditional market setup. This was actually for a photo shoot for Harvard Pilgrim, but the farmer modeled it after the way that they set up at one of their Somerville markets. And you'll see the very picturesque kind of, double-tiered, very appealing and open kind of model. And then you'll see in the other ones, there's the long table format. And the reason they change depending on the market is they found that depending which cultural community they're trying to serve, the different setups cater to those cultures differently. So the long tables allow for folks to kind of spread out and assess what crops are available, start to decide, take the crops that they're looking for, without providing any access to Zong and his farmers' extra crops behind the table. So you'll see on this one picture all the way to the right, you'll see there's a box of squash blossoms down there that he hadn't quite yet set up on the table. And so by creating that long table, it prohibits folks from venturing behind and grabbing other goods. And then what he also did is, you'll see this line in the top left-hand corner. That is all before the market has even started. So this is still 15 minutes before the market has started. And a lot of our farmers have a really big following from different cultural communities, depending on the market. And we've heard of stories of folks driving down from New Hampshire to access certain crops that they can't find anywhere else. So people are very eager to get a hold of the crops that they've driven a long distance to attain. So one system is, we have different farmers have developed different systems for purchasing protocols at their markets. And for this one, since there aren't allowed to be any transactions before the actual start of the market, they do allow folks to grab crops and stand in line, or grab crops and ask them to hold them for them until they make it up to the front of the line, to really ease that the internal stress that folks have traveled so far and they won't have access to these crops that they've been looking forward to all week. Because that is a very true reality for a lot of the farmers that we work with and a lot of the customers that they serve, is these crops are very, very close to their culture and to their consumption habits, and so they want to make sure they have access to these crops. Here's another farmer. Her name is Valeria, and Valeria has been farming with us for many years. She was also co-farming at another farm that also supported refugee and immigrant farmers that unfortunately had to close its doors. They had to shut down their farm portion of the program because of costs. So we absorbed a lot of farmers a lot of Bhutanese farmers from that program. And then there were also many Burundian farmers that were at both our program and their program. So we tried to provide land expansion to compensate for the land that they would lose. Valeria used to go to the market in Worcester as part of, so this is it's a slightly different model, a program that runs a slightly different model. So what they would do is they would hire a couple farmers to organize, to be their day of, to man the booths, and to organize the farmers in acquiring a crop list that the staff of the organization would decide and would distribute. So Valeria was very used to this market in Worcester, and when that program shut its doors, she asked us if she could still go to the market, and we said absolutely, but we work a little differently. So the way, she would take on all the risk, but then she would also take on all the benefit. And what we saw by that change, and this was 2 years ago that she took it on for herself, was a larger interest in really starting to learn about the customers, the people across the table, and to really figure out what crops those customers were looking for. And so within that year, even though she had been paid to stand behind the booth and was selling all the crops, 3 and 4 years ago to those same customers, in the year that she took ownership, she found that there were a lot of crops that she didn't have, that they were looking for, that she didn't know they were looking for previously. And so she came to us mid-season, and that's really how we established the farmer-to-farmer sales platform. So for some farmers that are at a market and they've newly found out that this customer is looking for a crop that another Flats Mentor farm carries, and they were coming to them in hopes that they would carry it, or that they're just plain looking for it, Valeria can go and do a farmer-to-farmer sales and be able to take that crop to market, to be able to serve that customer. And then the following year, she's able to trial it in that year and see what the market cap is. And then the following year, she's able to plan for it in her crop plan and establish it as one of her more regular crops. So it creates that business model where each farmer can really see what their customers are looking for, can trial a crop from week to week without taking on too much land risk. It's not a crop that they just put X number of square feet into and then are taking a total loss. So we found that as a really good model, and Valeria is the reason that model was created, because she was able to take ownership of that market, really start to see what that market potential would be. This is Song, and this is in Arlington, at the Arlington Farmers Market. And you can see from the picture that all of the bins are empty, which is a good sign, but it also means that it was she wasn't able, it was earlier in the season, so she hadn't been able to bring as many crops as she knew the market was looking for. But I like to show this picture because of what she's holding. And she's holding a bunch with 3 different greens in the bunch. And I like to call it a different kind of mixed green. So you'll see pea tendrils on the left, and then it's tricolor amaranth in the center, and water spinach all the way over to the right. And so what she found was, for her market, she had folks that wanted to purchase all 3, but maybe there were recipes that maybe called for all 3, or only called for little bits of each. And they didn't want to buy all 3 crops, and so they were having, she was having a hard time getting the larger bunches to sell. So she, after having conversations with customers, observing customers, decided to do a mixed lettuce bunch like this, mixed greens bunch. And she sells out of these quite fast. And it's just a mix catered to the specific cultural community she's selling to in Arlington, to be sure that there's really no food waste, and that she can sell more of the greens that she's growing. And those are all stories I like to highlight for farmers markets. There are many more for each farmer that goes to market. There's a story of ingenuity and adapted, something that they've adapted to better serve the customers. And then, so I should say, the history of Flats Mentor Farm started with farmers markets, and that was about 15 years ago was, I believe, the first farmers market. And that really started because there was a Hmong farmer that approached our executive director, Maria Morera, and said, they won't accept me at the market. I need help. And that was really the impetus for forming World Farmers, the organization, the nonprofit, in 2010. That was really the catalyst, saying, okay, this program needs to provide more than just access to land. Folks are looking for more than just access to land. They're looking to build a business. They're looking to become contributors, and they need support in accessing and figuring out what marketing looks like in this country. And so that's been, the piece that World Farmers has started to take on, and that's when farmers markets really started to they started to grow in the late 2000s, and then World Farmers was formed. But that was mainly for the Hmong farmers. And so with the influx of African farmers, we've seen a very different interest in business model. And a lot of those individuals are very, very connected to the community that they come from, and they're looking to meet the customers where they are, rather than fitting into the market spaces that are already formed. So many of the African farmers that we work with who sell at, we have a list of churches that folks sell at, and so they'll set up at churches or community centers and do a much shorter version of a farmer's market, and much more catered to the cultural community that they're either a part of or that they know are looking for these crops. So unlike at the farmers markets, where a lot of the Hmong farmers and African farmers are growing for a specific cultural community, they also have to have many other more mainstream crops to kind of fill out the table for those other customers that are cycling through. Whereas these Burundian farmers, if they're set up at a church that's primarily Burundian and East African, then they're going to know the top 5 crops that community is looking for. And so they're going to bring those 5 crops and really do targeted sales. And they're there for a much shorter period of time. They're part of the church community, so they've already built long-term relationships. And after a summer, then those churchgoers know that they're going to stop buying their greens on a Friday after work because they're going to be able to buy them on a Sunday or Saturday after church. So that's been a really successful business model that we have had really no role in. That's been all farmer driven. When it first started, Maria supported these Brilliant farmers in being there with them, just as we did at farmers markets. If they requested, so that we can be a presence with them to assist with price setting, kind of customer navigation. But there have been many farmers since these three ladies that have set up at churches that have not requested or required any staff support. We just ask that they let us know where they're setting up so that we have a one farmer, one market rule. And that way we can assure that each farmer is able to continue to build their own customer base and be sure that it's maintained without competition from other farmers at the farm that may have the same crops. Other really unique marketing systems have come out of the African community. We've got folks who do maybe they live in Lowell, but they've got friends and they've got a friend that lives in Boston that goes to work in, downtown Boston that is part of a different Burundian or Kenyan community. And so they'll send them a text and say, hey, next week I'm going to have a lot of kale, amaranth, fresh beans, and corn, call all your friends. I'll be there at 1:00 and I'll set up for an hour and sell my stuff. So you've been seeing a lot of that too, where it's they'll go to someone's apartment and either do a drop off and that friend will help facilitate sales, or they'll do kind of a mini market in someone's home. So really, really, really cool models that are very much tied to the cultural community and the network there. So they're really figuring out how to utilize build their services around the market that they already know. Did I hear there may be a question coming?
Yes. I do have a few questions from the audience if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah.
There was a question that came in concerning livestock, and one viewer is asking, are there any livestock farmers? And if there are livestock farms, has there been consideration to expand some of the cropland or services to incorporate livestock?
Sure. That's a great question. So we had chickens at one point in I believe it was early 2010s. It may have even been 2010 when we were formed. We had a Heifer International grant that built a chicken coop and provided, and all the Hmong farmers had a different portion of the chicken coop and had their own chickens. And so we had that chicken coop but that was really not part of, I should caveat, we have not supported in any livestock production that has led to business development. So those chickens were really for individual consumption. And then 2 years ago, there were only 3 Hmong farmers that were left. All the other farmers had moved to other states to continue farming. There were only 3 left. And so we had kind of 2 reasons to get rid of the chickens. One, it ended up being kind of an equity thing where 3 out of, at the time, 250 individuals, have access to a chicken coop for family consumption. And that's prime land. And the other piece was that we had a food safety inspection, and they said that the placement of the coop was less than ideal. So at that time, we decided to disband the chickens and move to purely vegetable. As far as actual livestock, I think that at this time we have not put thought towards it, and that's really because, as I said, all of the farmers that we work with were through word of mouth. So, and we've had a couple folks who've expressed interest in livestock, but we just don't have the staff knowledge or land space for that. I think if there became an interest of a collection of farmers, then we would make space to figure it out, or we'd connect with other farmers in the region or in the state that knew how to support and how to teach those things. But as of now, we haven't put staff time towards livestock.
Okay. A viewer sends in another question concerning land access. Where does the
Hmm.
organization get the land from? Any specific states other than Massachusetts?
So we are just one of those really lucky individuals that have a gracious landowner. So that 70-acre parcel that the farm was formed on has been the 70 acres that the program's been running on since 1984. And the landowner and the landowner's family have no interest in removing the access. So that is how we're able to do a program. I fully acknowledge that there are many programs that can't run the way we do because they are not going to have that the knowledge that the land is going to be there next year or even in 5 years. We have that knowledge, so we're able to really give that assurance to each farmer. We did 2 years ago or a year and a half ago as an organization purchase a piece of land. So now as an organization, as World Farmers, we do own some land, which is very exciting. It has a small amount of tillable acres, but we're still weaving that into what we call the fourth phase of the program, which is those farmers that are interested in acquiring land off-site, how we can support them in trialing their interest and abilities to move off the land and be independent. And so we're working that into that phase, and very excited by it. And then starting this year, we're going to have another farm site. We're going to have 10 acres out near Worcester. So we're really excited about that. A lot of farmers who live in Worcester are excited about that, to have some land that's a bit closer to them. And we've had talks with a farmer in Rhode Island to do a farm, but that didn't go anywhere for this season because those 3 land sites are a lot to handle at the moment. So we're excited to move on to the 10 acres outside of Worcester. We are always looking. If we have so many folks on the land, and a lot of them are asking for more land, and we try and serve them. We try to service them and provide that more land every time a farmer asks, which is why we acquired the additional land as an organization and why we're opening this other 10 acres. So if anyone has any leads, let us know, and I'm happy to chat about it.
All right. And then last questions concerning the products. Has there been any value-added products or consideration to add value-added products?
Yes. So over the last few years, we've had different Hmong farmers do Hmong veggie rolls, and they've utilized different commercial kitchens around the state. Mostly, the last time one was used was with the Worcester Regional Food Hub, and that was also Zong. What we found is a lot of the younger farmers or the second generation family members are interested in supporting the value added space, but the older farmers don't really have the interest and don't really see the value in the value added. So far it hasn't kind of run away with us, but we did get funds, and we partnered with the Lancaster town to renovate the commercial kitchen in Lancaster, which we were really excited about. That was through the Massachusetts Food Ventures program through MDAR, and which is a program that supports all infrastructure development. And so we're really excited that it's fully finished and renovated, and we have a few farmers that are itching to get into that space to start value-added development. And also we have one farmer who's interested in doing a catering business. So she would be using crops that she's growing and other crops from the farm to cater to. She has a hospital connection and a community center connection. And then we also have, we just acquired a mill. And so we're building out a mill house for it. And we have a lot of farmers so they specialize in a white African corn. And that corn goes for a lot of different meals. And so it can be harvested at many different phases of its maturity, and depending on who they're selling it to, and depending on what the buyer wants to use that corn, what recipe the buyer wants to use that corn for. One of the potential recipes is milled corn, but also things like cornmeal, all different size grains. So we're excited to roll that out over the next year or two, and hopefully we'll be able to open that up for more use than just our farmers. But we anticipate a long line to be able to use that. So we're hoping that'll be rolled out this year, and if not, then the following year.
Mm-hmm. And our last question in this segment, any thoughts to having a recipe book, or is there such a thing that exists of all the favorite recipes of the farmers?
Yeah, so I should get that up online. We have one that we created before I joined the team, and I believe it was I think it was developed around 7 years ago, but it's all recipes for the Asian greens that the Hmong farmers grow. So I think a really cool thing would be to revamp that one and then do another one for East African cuisine, do one for West African cuisine. So that's we should expand it more, but we do have one recipe book. It is more Asian focused, and vision for more in the future, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we do have a CSA, and I'll get to that later. And with that CSA, each week we do a featured ethnic crop, and there's a recipe with that crop that uses that crop in it, so to get folks interested and excited about new.
Okay.
So the other piece to the markets is wholesale. And I'll summarize this relatively quickly. We function similar to a food hub. So this was developed, as I mentioned before, as a way for those farmers that didn't have the customer-facing individual who could help with translations and communications, didn't have a driver, or were just not interested in interfacing with customers. This provided them a market outlet. So we've been doing wholesale through the program for the last 5 or 6 years, but consistently this will be our consistent 4th year. So then it would be 6 or 7 years. This has consistently been, this will be our 4th back-to-back year. So those products go out to ethnic grocers like Tropical, Vicentes, and then also other grocery stores like Rousseau's. We have sold to Market Basket in the past, but that was about 7 years ago. That is not on the current docket of buyers. We also sell to restaurants a little bit. We've been having a hard time figuring out how to tap into that. So anyone have tips that they want to share, please do. And then also schools. So we currently sell to 2 schools. We're going to have a conversation with Farm to School Network about how to build that out. We've been looking into universities as well. So there's some scaling up potential in there that we're excited about, but it's really those specialty buyers that we right now have targeted as much as we want, in the same model as the farmers markets, where each of those farmers are taking responsibility and joy out of serving diverse customers. We want to be sure that our wholesale goods are going to that we're prioritizing those specialty crops that our farmers are growing and that other communities are seeking. So we also sell to 2 mobile markets, one in Worcester, one in Somerville, and a lot of those cater towards diverse communities. And then of course those buyers that I mentioned. I have thought about how we could do convenience store sales. So if anyone has ideas or thoughts on that, I'd love to hear about how we brainstorm about how to scale that up. But so yeah, we're trying to model our wholesale similarly to the services that the direct markets provide, but we also acknowledge that when it comes down to it, if a farmer has surplus lettuce, we're going to sell that surplus lettuce. So we try and have a range of buyers to be sure that any crop that the farmer comes to us asking us to sell, we can sell. This is just the van downtown. This van was also a part of an MDAR grant, the Massachusetts Food Ventures program. So if you're a nonprofit looking for infrastructure, please look into that. And then this is Lucas with Gila, along with some other daikon radish, some peppers, eggplant. So Lucas wanted to scale up in wholesale, and he'd never grown Gila before. It's a bitter eggplant, and he he'd never grown it before. It was incredibly successful, and now he's one of our growers of Gelá that go to the wholesale, go to Brazilian markets, which is I should have mentioned they're part of our wholesale platform as well, as we target a lot of Brazilian markets because we have a good understanding of the market space for that culture and the stores that are in place for that. But we also created a CSA 3 years ago to be able to support those farmers who come to us mid-season and say, I heard that you buy, I have 4 peppers, 7 eggplants, and a lot of beans. Is there any market for this? And so we're using the CSA as a way to make sure that every farmer who comes to us asking to sell can be serviced, and we can accept. And we always market the CSA saying, you may get something slightly different than what it said in the newsletter. You might get a surprise extra item, and that's because a farmer brought it to us and wanted to be sure we could purchase it from them. So in my opinion, as soon as that need goes away, then so will the CSA. So if farmer, a lot of times the farmers that we work with, and that's how we have that phase 2 portion, need that year or two to really start to see, how many boxes 3 rows equals. And, I have half of a box. If it's not a full box, I can't take it to a buyer, but we can accept it for the CSA. So it's to create that safety net for those who are scaling up and learning what scaling up means and are in that learning curve. And then I just have a bunch of, we have 8 minutes. I have a bunch of props that I was going to cover. And I think I'm going to pause for questions and see if there are any questions.
Really, there was one
we just
question
did.
that came. One question came in concerning back to land access. The viewer says, "I understand there's a similar refugee farm in Maine. Are they similar in terms of operation models? And in your experience, what are other working structures?"
Cool. So I'm not sure which program you're talking about in Maine. There's one called Cultivating Community, and then there's one called the Somali Bantu Community of Lewiston, Maine. And we're very closely partnered with the Somali Bantu Community of Lewiston, Maine. It's the Somali Bantu Association. And they just redid their website, and it's a beautiful website. And their model is very, very similar to ours. So that organization is run by a Somali Bantu farmer himself who saw a need. It serves all Somali Bantu farmers. So similar to how our program started supporting all Hmong farmers, his supports all one culture because that's the influx of culture. And the Somali Bantu specifically come from vegetable agrarian backgrounds, where it's a Somali individuals do more livestock. So he actually built out a livestock portion of his program last year. So he's doing both livestock support and vegetable production support. Muhyiddin services, I believe it's up to 180 farmers now, and he has 5 sites, all of varying acreages. And because he's from the community, he's incredibly tied to the mission. He's incredibly tied to the way in which it operates and being sure that the farmer is served. So he works day and night to be sure that those farms operate the way that they need to. And his model is very similar. There's no graduation. There's no, aside from food safety, there's no required trainings. And it's very much based on farmer need. So that's the one in Maine I know of. Another really good model is out in, I believe it's Minnesota, and it's HAFA, the Hmong American Farmers Association, and they started in a very different way. So they started, I believe it's about a decade ago, probably maybe even more. No, I think it's about a decade, and they started with a group of families who were looking for land. I don't remember how many families it was. I think it was about 10, maybe 7. So it was much smaller group that they're serving, number of individuals that they're serving, but they approached it in a very planned way. And so they acquired funds to purchase X number of acres, and then delineated out all of the plots to those different groups, families of farmers. And each of those farmers will either have 5 or 10 acres. So it's a very specific amount. There isn't really in-between room. And then they work with buyers to do more contracted sales. So they'll go out to wholesale sites. And the farmers also do, they do some farmers markets, but there's huge competition issues. And a lot of the Hmong farmers that go to farmers markets in places other than Massachusetts that don't have the one farmer, one market rule have outbid themselves. And so the bunches are, 6 inches in diameter, and they're $2 or $1.50 for yu choy. So farmers markets are no longer sustainable at that point for the farmer. So the way this program runs is they go out and get contracted sales from different buyers, and then they hand the contract over to the farmer, and then they help facilitate, make sure the farmer can abide by it. But they function on a more wholesale basis in a much more regimented way. But they've got a beautiful farm out there. So it's just a different approach. But they knew the needs of the farmer before they built the program. So they knew the need was there. They knew what dynamics they were dealing with, and then they created a program that would fit those needs and those dynamics. Versus us, we're kind of creating as we go and making sure that we're malleable to the needs as they arise. So just slightly different.
Okay. That was the last question I had. So I know you're starting your wrap up. So go right ahead. We'll probably have some more questions at the end.
Okay, I'm going to buzz through these. It's basically just showing a lot of different. I'm just acknowledging that there's 3 minutes left. I don't want to use up people's time, but I'm happy to stay on after to answer more questions if folks have them. Something I really like about this picture is I don't know if you could see my mouse when I do this, but in the top left corner, you'll see some amaranth, red amaranth that's a bit more sprightly, and some that's pretty droopy. And I know I would never want to buy that. And yet in the back, the price is the same for both. So the produce on the left is ours. It came from the flats, and the produce on the right flew in from California. And yet, when our produce is gone, those customers are still going to buy that droopy, very sad-looking amaranth for $4 a pound. And that really speaks to the demand that there is for ethnic produce, for cultural crops, and the demand from the customer to really have these crops that are familiar to them, that are tied to them, and their culture and their family and their history. And so we really, as I mentioned in wholesale, we really try and create that space where those who are in biggest demand for it are able to get it. Taioba is the Brazilian crop. We're the only ones to import the seed in the States, and we sell that to the Brazilian markets in the area. A lot of farmers grow fresh beans, but it's very popular all across Africa and in Haiti. And this is the white African corn I was talking about. It looks a lot like, for those of you who work with cattle, it looks a lot like feed corn. Very close, but used for a lot of different recipes, and you just harvest it at different maturity levels depending on what recipe you're using it for. This is the connecting to your community. If you are a farmer on the line and you're interested in growing cultural crops, that's really awesome. Just be sure you know exactly what variety that individual or that community is looking for. That really speaks to this Taioba. It looks a lot like taro. It is very different, and you cannot eat the leaves of taro. You have to cook Taioba as well, but if you cook taro, it'll still burn your throat, whereas Taioba will not after you've cooked it. So little things like that. Just be sure that you're very aware of the varieties that you're pursuing. We do support farmers in USDA access. We have 14 high tunnels at the farm, which is quite a few, and they're all individually owned by the farmer, except for one, which we gained access of after a farmer moved to Georgia. We also partner with UMass Amherst for pest management, and here's that value added. These are the Hmong veggie rolls that Zong did a couple years ago, and he scaled back on these, but he's looking to scale back up. And this is my closing slide. We do have the CSA I had talked about. It's not too late to sign up if you're looking for a CSA. We have pickup locations in Lancaster at our office, in Natick, and in Cambridge. If you reach out to me, I'd be happy to send you the addresses of those spots. And then we also do pickups at workplaces. So when you go to sign up for one, you'll see a lot of others listed, but these are the ones that are open to the public. And then if you want to check out a farmer's market near you, we have to change the URL. It's rather long, but that's the URL as far as I know it. Our website is currently down, which is horrible timing for this webinar. But so if you try that in 2 days, then it should lead you there. And then every summer we do a tour to farm. And that's a time where any of you are welcome to come to the farm at 3 o'clock. We'll talk about the program. We usually have some legislators there, and we'll walk around the farm, hear from the farmers, and kind of see some of the individual farms on the land. So that's Friday, July 19th. So mark your calendars. And that is all. I whizzed through the end of it. I always take more on the programs than I think I'm going to.
Wow.
But if anyone has questions, I'm happy to stay after.
Sure. Well, there was one last question that came through, and it's from a viewer that came on a little late. They wanted to know, is Flats Mentor Farms organic or support sustainable farming?
Sure. So we are not certified organic. The paperwork would be a tremendous barrier given how many folks we have operating their own enterprises. However, we provide all services we provide organic. So all pest management practices we work with UMass on are IPM and organic, integrated pest management. And all fertilizers or manure, but right now it's fertilizer because we need to get a better manure source, compost source. All fertilizer is organic as well as any sprays that Sue from UMass may recommend. Now, we do have the occasional slip up from folks who are, working as subsistence farmers at the land. And so that's another reason why we really can never be certified, because we have so many individuals. But we've worked really hard over the last 4 to 7 years, to really be sure that the understanding of what organic production means and why, if you're consuming it for your family, each farmer on the land takes great pride in what they produce because they're also consuming it for their family. So we do education about what synthetic pesticides are, why they're harmful, potentially more harmful for crops and for people, and that kind of thing. And then for, you also asked conservation or general sustainability. We do work with NRCS, and we've been trying to get cover crop seeds down for the last 2 years to assist in soil health. As I mentioned, our compost manure source is, we need a new one. So we've been using organic fertilizer, but we've also been working on increasing cover crop use and increasing understanding of the benefits of cover cropping.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, and I should say, because I'm on a NOFA Mass website webinar, we are also currently sponsored for 3 years through a NOFA Mass program that's working with farmers across the state on soil health development. So we just completed our first year. We were working with Caro and Laura at NOFA Mass, and they've been a great resource to us. So we're actively working on making sure that that's a big part of the program.
Mm-hmm. And Jessy, I want to thank you for that last plug, because that's some of the things that to our viewers you have access to as well, particularly as a member. And so just to give another shout out about the Tour de Farm event that will take place at Flats Mentor Farm on Friday, July 19th. That's 3 to 6 p.m. You don't want to miss that. It's a great time to see this farm live and in living color, and to see the wonderful work that they do. Definitely when the website's up, Jessy, I believe you said in about 2 to 3 days, people should check it out.
Yes.
No worries, that happens. That's technology.
It is.
You will be able to take part and purchase from these farmers. They're at 25 farmers markets in Massachusetts. So when the website's up, you can take a look and see where you can go to pick up their beautiful produce. And then lastly, the CSA sign up with pickup locations in the Lancaster, Natick, and Cambridge areas in Massachusetts. Again, give them a couple days with the website. You can go sign up, but definitely take advantage of that tour de farm. I'm going to make it my business to make my way there as
Great.
well so I can see the wonderful, wonderful work that they're doing. This is just great work. At this time, I really want to thank Jessy for her time sharing the beautiful work that the farmers are doing at Flat Cementer Farm. You all are doing amazing work, and I'm just so grateful that you were able to share that with our viewing and listening audience on NOFA Mass, and just keep up that great work. Um, just for
Thanks,
some
Anna.
closing points, don't forget NOFA will be having their summer conference back home at Hampshire College, August 10th and 11th. Please go check out our website. Registration will be happening soon, so you want to get in and get registered, get settled, bring a friend if you can. Next month, we will be hearing from our partners in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, One Art Community Farm. This is where they marry art, community, and farming right in the west side part of Philadelphia, doing some wonderful work. Malika Gelpin and the crew down there in Philadelphia, One Art Community Farm. That will be our webinar next month in May. This recording will be up by the end of the week on our YouTube page, so you can check it out. And if you would like a link, just reach out to me at anna@nofamass.org and we'll get that to you. So thank you to everyone for spending your time with us. We appreciate you. Look forward to hearing and seeing you next month. Look forward to seeing you at the conference in August. And if you're going out in July, tour the farm, Flats Mentor Farm. Hopefully we'll see you there as well. Thank you all and have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.